She sat on a Mafia boss's lap to escape her toxic ex. His whisper changed everything that night. Before we dive into the story, tell me where in the world you're watching from, and if this story steals your heart, please hit subscribe. The clasp of the champagne flute was slick against Gemma's palm, her knuckles white as she tried to control the tremor that had started in her fingers and was now threatening to betray the icy calm she was projecting. The low thrum of the jazz band, the golden wash of the chandeliers, the polite murmur of 100 conversations, it all dissolved into a sharp, singular point of terror. Mark was here. He was not supposed to be here. This gala was for the city's elite, a place of supposed safety, and yet he had found his way in, his eyes locking onto her from across the ballroom with a predatory gleam that made her blood run cold. She had left him 3 months ago, a desperate middle-of-the-night escape with nothing but a handbag and the clothes on her back, and she had spent every day since looking over her shoulder. Now, the man she had been fleeing was walking toward her, a sickeningly familiar smile twisting his handsome features. He reached her before she could even form a plan, his fingers closing around her upper arm in a grip that felt like a steel trap. "Gemma, darling," he hissed, his voice a grotesque parody of affection, loud enough for only her to hear. "You look beautiful. Did you really think you could just disappear? Did you think I would let you?" His fingers dug deeper, pinching the delicate silk of her midnight blue gown. She heard a faint tear, felt the fabric rip near her shoulder, and a small, choked sound escaped her. His smile widened. "There, now you look a little less perfect, a little more used just how I like you." Panic, sharp and metallic, flooded her senses. She looked around desperately, but the crowd was oblivious, lost in their own worlds of champagne and influence. No one saw the quiet violence happening in plain sight. Gemma's eyes darted, searching for any exit, any ally, any escape. And then she saw him. In a secluded alcove, framed by 2 marble pillars, sat a man who seemed to exist in his own pocket of silence and authority. He was not mingling. The world came to him. Senators and chief executive officers approached his table with a deference that bordered on fear, speaking briefly before bowing away. He was tall and broad, his black tailored suit fitting him like a second skin, a silver watch the only glint of light on his person. His face was sharp, defined by a strong jaw shadowed with dark stubble, and his eyes, even from this distance, looked cold. Damien Delano. She knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. He was a phantom, a whisper, the owner of skyscrapers and shipping lanes, and it was rumored, the unseen hand behind the city's entire criminal underworld. He was the most dangerous man in the room. He was her only chance. In a move born of pure, unadulterated survival, Gemma ripped her arm from Mark's grasp. The suddenness of it, the sheer audacity, stunned him for a crucial second. She did not run for the exit. She did not scream for help. She walked with as much dignity as she could muster, straight toward the alcove. Mark, recovering, followed her, his face darkening with rage. "Gemma, don't you dare walk away from me," he snarled, grabbing for her again. But she was already past the 2 silent, unmoving guards who flanked Damien's space. They tensed, hands moving inside their jackets, but a flicker of Damien's fingers stopped them. He watched her approach, his icy blue eyes missing nothing, not the terror in her emerald gaze, not the fresh tear on her gown, not the furious man following in her wake. Gemma did not stop at the edge of the table. She did not ask for permission. In a final, desperate gamble, she walked directly to him, turned, and sat down on his lap. The entire ballroom seemed to fall silent around them. She could feel the hard muscle of his thighs beneath her, the solid wall of his chest at her back. He was warm, radiating a contained power that was vastly different from Mark's chaotic brutality. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in the crook of his shoulder, inhaling the scent of expensive cologne and clean cotton. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking, her lips brushing the skin of his neck. "Please, just for a minute, pretend I belong to you. He won't stop." Mark had frozen a few feet away, his face a mask of disbelief and sudden, dawning fear as he recognized the man whose lap she now occupied. Damien Delano did not move for a long moment. He simply observed the scene. He looked at the trembling woman in his arms, his gaze clinical as he noted the torn shoulder of her dress and the faint, older bruise on her collarbone that her gown just failed to hide. Then his eyes lifted, settling on Mark. His expression did not change, but the coldness intensified, a palpable drop in temperature that made Mark physically recoil. Damien slowly, deliberately, wrapped one large hand around Gemma's waist, his thumb brushing against her side in a gesture that was both possessive and steadying. He pulled her closer, settling her more firmly against him. He leaned down, his mouth near her ear, and his voice, a low, dangerous whisper that vibrated through her entire body, changed her life forever. "If you're going to play my woman," he murmured, his breath warm against her skin, "you better be ready for what that means." He then lifted his gaze back to Mark, dismissing him with a barely perceptible nod. Mark, pale and suddenly sweating, turned and practically fled, swallowed by the crowd. Gemma was left trembling in the lion's den, saved from the jackal but now caught by the apex predator. The music swelled again, the hum of conversation resuming, but the atmosphere around Damien's table remained charged. Gemma was acutely aware of every person in the opulent ballroom, of the whispers that were surely starting, of the eyes that flickered toward them and then quickly away. She was still sitting on Damien Delano's lap, and the arm he had wrapped around her waist had not loosened. If anything, his grip had become more proprietorial, a silent statement to the entire room. She felt pinned, not by force, but by the sheer weight of his presence. She tried to make herself move, to thank him and slide off his lap, but her muscles refused to obey. The adrenaline that had propelled her across the room was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and the terrifying realization of what she had done. She had solved her immediate problem by creating an infinitely more complex and dangerous one. "He is gone," Damien stated, his voice no longer a whisper but a low, resonant rumble near her ear. It was not a question. "For now." He made no move to push her away, seemingly content to let her remain, to let the room watch. "You should drink this." A waiter had appeared, silent as a ghost, holding a tray with a single glass of water. Damien took it and pressed it into her hand. His fingers brushed hers and his skin was warm, his touch firm and steady, a stark contrast to the icy tremor she still could not control. She drank, the cool liquid a shock to her system, helping to clear the fog of panic. "Thank you," she finally managed to say, her voice thin. I should go, I'm sorry to have," interrupted. She made to stand, but his hand on her waist tightened, holding her in place. It was not a violent gesture, not the bruising grip Mark favored, but it was just as unyielding. "You will stay," he said, the words a soft command, not a request. "You made a very public spectacle of running to me for protection. If you leave now, you look foolish. If you leave now, he believes your act was a lie, and he will be waiting for you by your car." Damien's logic was cold, precise, and utterly flawless. He was right. Running away now would undo the one desperate act that had saved her. She relaxed just barely against him, a silent, unwilling acquiescence. "What is your name?" he asked, his tone conversational as if they were any other couple at the gala. Gemma Davies." "Gemma," he repeated, testing the sound of it. "And the man?" Mark Venson, my ex-boyfriend." A dark look flickered in his icy blue eyes at the word ex-boyfriend, a subtle tightening of his jaw. "He is not accustomed to being told no," she added, feeling a pathetic need to explain the scene he had witnessed. Damien's gaze drifted over her head, scanning the room, acknowledging a politician with a stiff nod, dismissing a banking magnate with a glance. He was completely at ease, holding court with a woman he'd never met on his lap, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Men like him," Damien said, his voice dropping low again, "understand only one thing, power. You took his power from him tonight in front of all these people. He will not forgive that." Gemma shivered. "What do I do?" she whispered, the question escaping before she could stop it. She was asking a Mafia boss for advice. She felt lightheaded. Damien looked down at her then, his focus entirely on her, and the intensity of his gaze made her feel as though she were the only person in the room. "For tonight," he said, "you do nothing, you stay by my side. You will smile when I smile. You will drink the champagne I order for you. You will, for all intents and purposes, be mine. And you will be the safest woman in this city." His thumb stroked her side, a slow, contemplative gesture that sent a jolt of unsettling warmth through her. "And in return?" she asked, her voice barely audible. A shadow of a smile touched his lips, a cold, dangerous expression that did not reach his eyes. "In return," he murmured, "I get the pleasure of your company, and you get to find out what it means." For the next hour, Gemma lived in a surreal haze. Damien finally let her stand, but only to guide her to the chair beside his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. He introduced her to no one, and yet, by keeping her so visibly at his side, he introduced her to everyone. He spoke to her quietly, asking questions that seemed innocuous but felt like interrogations. Where did she work? An art gallery curating for private collectors. Where did she live? A small apartment downtown. He filed each piece of information away, his expression unreadable. He was a master of control, his entire being exuding a calm authority that she found both terrifying and, to her shame, deeply attractive. He was nothing like Mark. Mark was a chaotic storm, all bluster and insecure rage. Damien was the abyss, deep, cold, and absolute. As the gala began to wind down, the jazz band playing its final, mournful tune, Damien stood, pulling her to her feet with a gentle tug on her hand. "It is time to leave," he said. The fear returned, sharp and immediate. "Leave to where?" "My car is, I can call a cab," she stammered. Damien simply looked at her, one dark eyebrow raised. "You are not listening, Gemma. You are not going home tonight. He will be there, or he will be watching. You came with me, you will leave with me." He said it with such finality that she knew arguing was pointless. He was not offering his protection, he was enforcing it. He guided her through the dispersing crowd, his hand once again firmly on her back, a shield and a claim. They walked out of the golden ballroom, past the marble columns, and into the cool, rain-lashed night. A black, sleek car, so dark it seemed to absorb the light, idled at the curb. One of his guards opened the back door, and Damien ushered her inside before sliding in beside her. The door closed with a heavy, definitive thud, sealing them in opulent silence. The car moved silently through the rain-slicked city streets. Gemma stared out the window, watching the blur of lights, her heart pounding a heavy, slow rhythm against her ribs. She was trapped. She had escaped one cage only to walk directly into another, this one far more luxurious but infinitely more dangerous. Damien did not speak. He simply sat beside her, radiating a quiet, immense presence. He was not looking at her. He was looking straight ahead, his profile like something carved from stone. She had no idea where he was taking her. She only knew that her life, which had been unraveling for months, had just been irrevocably torn apart and restitched by a man who bought and sold pieces of the city, and who had, for tonight at least, decided he owned her too. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, the doors sliding apart with a whisper of expensive, silent machinery. Gemma stepped out onto a floor of polished black marble, her heels clicking in the cavernous space. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, occupying the entire top floor of one of the city's tallest skyscrapers. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking, panoramic view of the rain-soaked skyline, the city lights glittering below them like a carpet of scattered jewels. The space was minimalist, decorated in shades of charcoal, black, and cream. It was beautiful, sterile, and cold. It was the lair of a man who valued control and order above all else. "Welcome to my home," Damien said from behind her. His voice, now free of the ballroom's ambient noise, was even deeper, resonating in the quiet. He shrugged off his suit jacket, tossing it over the back of a sleek, black leather sofa. He was still wearing his white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing strong, muscular arms and the edge of a dark tattoo coiling around his left bicep. The silver watch glinted as he moved to a low-lit bar in the corner. "Drink," he offered, not looking at her. "Whiskey, or perhaps something to help you sleep." Gemma shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself. The torn shoulder of her dress gaped, exposing the skin and the strap of her bra. She felt exposed, out of place, a damaged doll in a pristine showroom. No, thank you. Mr. Delano, I appreciate what you did tonight. Truly, but I can't stay here. I should go." He poured himself a measure of amber liquid, swirling it in a heavy crystal tumbler. "You are still not grasping the severity of your situation, Gemma," he said, his back still to her. "You ran from a volatile man, you publicly humiliated him, and you did it by claiming the protection of his new and infinitely more dangerous replacement, me." He turned, leaning back against the bar, the glass held loosely in one hand. "You cannot go back to your apartment. It is the first place he will look. You cannot go to your friends, he will find you. You have involved me, and now, whether you like it or not, I am involved." He took a slow sip of his whiskey, his icy eyes pinning her in place. "You are safe here, nowhere else." A woman in a neat, gray uniform appeared from a hallway. She was older, with sharp eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun. Mrs. Petrov, Damien said, please show Miss Davies to the guest suite, find her something more comfortable to wear, and see to her shoulder. The woman, Mrs. Petrov, nodded once, her expression unreadable. This way, miss, she said, her voice crisp, with a faint Eastern European accent. Gemma looked from the housekeeper to Damien. He had thought of everything. He was handling her, just as he handled his business, with a detached, efficient precision. Defeated, and too exhausted to argue further, Gemma followed the housekeeper down a long, white hallway. The guest suite was larger than her entire apartment. A king-sized bed, a private bathroom in white marble, and another staggering view of the city. Laid out on the bed was a set of black silk pajamas. Mrs. Petrov clicked her tongue as she saw the angry red marks on Gemma's arm, now visible as she'd shrugged off her wrap. Men like that, the housekeeper muttered. They are small dogs who bark loud. She returned with a first aid kit and began to clean the scrape on Gemma's shoulder where Mark had torn the dress, her touch surprisingly gentle. You are lucky, Mrs. Petrov said, applying a soothing balm. Why? Gemma asked, wincing. The woman paused, her sharp eyes meeting Gemma's in the mirror. Because you ran to the wolf. The wolf eats dogs like that. She finished her work, applying a small bandage. You will be safe here. No one and nothing gets into this building without Mr. Delano's permission. She left, closing the door softly behind her, leaving Gemma alone in the opulent, silent cage. Gemma showered, the hot water stinging her skin, washing away the scent of the gala and Mark's lingering touch. She put on the silk pajamas, which felt foreign and sinfully soft against her skin. She was a prisoner, but one wrapped in luxury. She couldn't sleep. The city lights, the unfamiliar bed, the man down the hall, it was too much. She found herself packing, drawn back to the massive living room. Damien was still there, not in the lounge, but in an adjacent study, visible through a glass wall. He was on the phone, his back to her, looking out at the city he owned. She could not hear his words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was cold, clipped, and final. He was giving orders. He was handling things. A chill ran down her spine. Was he talking about Mark? He finished his call and turned, sensing her presence. He walked out of the study and joined her by the window. They stood in silence for a long time, side by side, two strangers bound by an act of desperation, looking down at the sleeping city. My men are at your apartment, he said finally, his voice quiet. They are packing your things. They will be here in the morning. Gemma's head snapped toward him. You sent men to my home without asking me. It was necessary. I also had them retrieve your car. It will be in the building's garage. He was dismantling her life, piece by piece, and reassembling it here in his fortress. You can't just take over my life, she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and a new, unfamiliar anger. Damien, you don't even know me. I know enough, he replied, turning to face her fully. The dim light of the city below cast shadows across his face, making his eyes seem even darker, more intense. I know you were in trouble. I know you are intelligent. You chose the one person in that room who could guarantee your safety. And I know you have fire. You are terrified, but you are still standing here arguing with me. He took a step closer. She could feel the heat radiating from him. I am not Mark Venson, Gemma. I do not find pleasure in fear, but I do require loyalty. You asked for my protection. I gave it. This is the price. And what is the price? She challenged, lifting her chin. How long am I your guest until you get bored, until Mark forgets? Mark will not forget, Damien said, his voice flat. Which is why he is being dealt with. My men are, impressing upon him the severity of his error. He will be given a choice, to leave this city and never return or to be removed from it permanently. Either way, by tomorrow, he will no longer be your problem. Gemma felt the blood drain from her face. Removed permanently. The euphemism hung in the air, cold and deadly. This was the reality of the man she had run to. This was the power she had blindly utilized. She was horrified by the casual, brutal finality of it. But beneath the horror, buried deep, was a dark, shameful flicker of relief. A life without Mark. A life without looking over her shoulder. A life without fear. Damien was offering her that in the only way he knew how. You're a monster, she breathed, the words out before she could stop them. Damien did not flinch. He did not deny it. His gaze was steady. I am what I need to be, he said simply. And tonight I am the monster you needed. Go to bed, Gemma. We will talk in the morning when your things are here and the threat is gone. He turned and walked back toward his study, a silent dismissal. Gemma stood by the window for a long time, her reflection a pale ghost against the glittering, dark city. Mrs. Petrov was right. She had run to the wolf, and now the wolf was deciding just what to do with her. Gemma slept in fractured bursts, waking to the unfamiliar silence of the penthouse, the air still and cool. When she finally rose, the morning light was streaming through the windows, painting the dark marble floors in shades of gray and gold. She found fresh clothes laid out for her on a chaise lounge, not the silk pajamas, but a simple, elegant cashmere sweater and tailored trousers, both in a soft cream color. They fit perfectly. She dressed, feeling like she was putting on a costume, and ventured out into the living area. Mrs. Petrov was there, offering coffee with a curt nod. In the center of the room sat 3 pristine suitcases, her suitcases. "They arrived an hour ago, miss," the housekeeper said. "Mr. Delano is in his study. He said to send you in when you were ready." Ready? Gemma took a deep breath, the hot coffee scalding her throat, steadying her nerves. She was no longer the terrified, desperate woman in a torn gown. She was a captive, yes, but she was a thinking, breathing person, and she would not be treated as a possession. She walked to the glass-walled study and, without knocking, opened the door. Damien was at his desk, a massive slab of dark wood, reviewing a stack of documents. He looked up, his icy blue eyes assessing her. In the daylight, he was even more imposing. He wore a crisp, dark gray shirt, the sleeves once again rolled up. He looked every bit the ruthless chief executive officer, but the coiled stillness in his shoulders betrayed the predator beneath. "Good morning, Gemma. Please sit." She ignored the chair, walking instead to the window, placing her coffee cup on a nearby table. "You had him beaten, didn't you?" she asked, her voice quiet but strong. Damien leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers together over his stomach. He did not dissemble. "My men were very persuasive. Mr. Venson was resistant to the idea of relocation. He required significant encouragement to see the wisdom in our suggestion." "Encouragement," she repeated, the word tasting like ash. "He is, as we speak, on a one-way flight to another continent, with a new bank account containing just enough money to start a life he will despise, and a very clear understanding that if he ever contacts you, or even speaks your name, his new life will be profoundly short. He is gone. The threat is neutralized." Gemma closed her eyes. It was done. The monster that had haunted her for the last year was, just like that, erased. She should have felt sick. She should have been appalled. And she was. But the overwhelming, crushing emotion that washed over her was relief. It was a profound, suffocating relief that made her knees weak. She had been living on a knife's edge for so long, and Damien, with a few phone calls, had removed the blade. She turned to face him, her expression a complex mixture of gratitude and revulsion. "So what now?" she asked. "The deal is done. Mark is gone. Am I free to go? Can I have my suitcases and my car keys and just leave?" "Yes," he said simply. The answer shocked her. She had been preparing for a fight, for another set of terms, for a longer imprisonment. "You can leave," Damien continued, his voice even. "Your car is downstairs. Your apartment lease has been terminated, and the security deposit is in your bank account, along with 3 months' rent. You are, as you say, free to go." He was watching her, his gaze sharp, analytical, as if this were all a test. He had not only removed the threat, he had severed all her ties to her old life. She had no apartment to return to. She had her car, her clothes, and a bank account that he had almost certainly put more money into than just her deposit. He had untethered her, leaving her with only one obvious, safe harbor. "Here." "You don't want me to go," she stated, the realization dawning. This was not an act of charity, it was a calculated move, a power play. "I want you to be safe," he countered smoothly. "Your old apartment was compromised, your routine was known, leaving you to fend for yourself would be incomplete. I do not leave tasks incomplete." "And what if I stay?" she asked, walking closer to his desk. "What then? What do I become? Your mistress, your pet?" "Another beautiful object in your cold, perfect penthouse." The words were sharp, and she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not anger, but intrigue. "You are not an object, Gemma," he said, his voice dropping. "Objects are replaceable. They do not have fire. They do not challenge me in my own study after spending a night in my home." He stood, a slow, deliberate movement, and walked around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. He was so tall, she had to crane her neck to look up at him. He didn't touch her, but his proximity was a physical force, a wall of heat and power. "If you stay," he said, his voice a low vibration. You stay as mine. You would want for nothing. You would be protected by the most powerful organization in this city. You would have a life you cannot even imagine. And what would you get? She whispered, her heart hammering. You, he said simply. I would get your loyalty. I would get the fire I saw last night. I would get the intelligence that knew to run to me and not to the police. I would get the woman who, even now, is not backing down. He lifted a hand and she flinched, a residual reflex from her time with Mark. Damien froze, his hand hovering in the air. His expression darkened, the coldness in his eyes replaced by a sudden glacial rage, but it was not directed at her. It was directed at the man who had taught her to flinch. Very slowly, he continued the movement, his touch impossibly gentle as his knuckles brushed her cheek. I would never, he whispered, his voice thick with a controlled violence, ever raise a hand to you. The only thing you would ever have to fear is my enemies. You would never have to fear me. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, a simple touch that sent a wildfire of sensation through her. She had been touched in violence and in anger for so long that this simple, possessive, gentle contact felt overwhelmingly intimate. She was trembling, but not with fear. It was something else, something dark and thrilling. This man was a killer. He was a criminal, a ruthless boss who reshaped the world to his will. And he was offering her a gilded cage where she would be safe, cherished, and owned. It was wrong. It was insane. But as his thumb brushed her lower lip, she knew with a terrifying certainty that she had no desire to leave. She had run from a chaotic, petty monster and found a king. What if I can't be what you want? She breathed. What if I'm broken? You are not broken, he said, his other hand coming up to cup her face. You are a survivor, and I have never been interested in the weak. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers, his icy eyes now warm with a possessive, burning light. Stay, Gemma, stay with me. The penthouse, which had at first felt like a sterile prison, slowly began to change. Or perhaps Gemma was the one changing. Damien was a man of routines. He left early in the morning for meetings at his legitimate corporate headquarters, a skyscraper that bore his family name, and he returned late in the evening. He moved with a quiet, lethal grace, always in control, his presence a low hum of power in the background of her new life. He gave her a credit card with no limit, telling Mrs. Petrov to arrange for anything she desired. He encouraged her to use his private library, to visit the building's exclusive spa, to redecorate the guest suite, her suite to her liking. He was giving her freedom, but it was a curated freedom, all within the unbreachable walls of his fortress. Gemma, however, did not spend her days shopping. She read. She explored the vast apartment, finding a private art collection that rivaled the gallery she used to work for, and she watched him. She learned to read the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the tightening of his jaw when a call displeased him, the rare, almost imperceptible relaxing of his shoulders when he sat with his whiskey at the end of the night, looking out at his city. They ate dinner together almost every night, served by Mrs. Petrov in the stark, formal dining room. Their conversations were cautious, a delicate dance of probing questions and veiled answers. She told him about her love for art, for the stories behind the paintings. He told her. Nothing. He spoke of business, of markets, of acquisitions, but never of the shadows, never of the violence that underpinned his empire. One evening, she found him in the library, a room paneled in dark, fragrant wood, a single green-shaded lamp illuminating a map of the city spread across a massive table. He was tracing the shipping lanes with one finger. This is what you do, she said, not as a question. This is the family business. He looked up, his expression unreadable. My grandfather built a small import-export company from a single fishing boat. My father expanded it. I diversified. You diversified into. Removing people, she said, her voice soft. She was testing him, pushing the boundary he had drawn. He straightened, his gaze sharp. I protect what is mine, Gemma. My family, my territory, my business. And now, you, Mark Venson, was a liability, an insect buzzing too close to what I value. I swat insects. I do not apologize for it. Am I just another asset, Damien? She asked, the question that had been haunting her. Something to protect, like your buildings and your shipping lanes. He closed the distance between them, his large body trapping her against the edge of the heavy desk. He placed his hands on the wood on either side of her, caging her in. You are not an asset, he said, his voice a low growl. You are a distraction. You are a complication. You are the one person in this city who speaks to me without fear. You are mine. And that, he leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear, makes you infinitely more valuable than any building I own. She shivered, her hands gripping the edge of the desk. The raw possession in his voice, the undisguised claim, should have sent her running. Instead, it sent a dark thrill through her, a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she was craving. The first time he kissed her, it was not gentle. It was acclaiming. It was weeks after the gala, after a long, tense day where she had seen him on the news, stone-faced, walking past a barrage of reporters asking about a rival's warehouse that had mysteriously burned to the ground. He had come home late, smelling of smoke and the cold night air. He found her waiting by the window, her arms wrapped around herself. He said nothing, simply walked to her, his eyes dark with a violent energy he was barely holding in check. He took her face in his hands, his grip firm, almost rough, and his mouth came down on hers. It was not a kiss of affection, it was a kiss of ownership, of territory. It was deep and demanding, a raw expression of the power he wielded, and she met him with a surprising, desperate hunger of her own. She was tired of being afraid. She was tired of being weak. And in his arms, pressed against his hard, unyielding body, she felt anything but weak. She felt chosen. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing heavily. His icy eyes were on fire. "You are playing with forces you do not understand, Gemma," he rasped, his forehead pressed to hers. "I am not a good man, the things I have done to build this, to protect it." "I know," she whispered, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "I am not afraid of you, Damien." A dark, dangerous smile touched his lips. "You should be," he murmured, before capturing her mouth again, this time with a possessive hunger that left no room for doubt. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, his mouth never leaving hers, and carried her from the living room, down the long, dark hallway to his room, his fortress within the fortress. The city lights blurred through the massive windows, silent witnesses to her final, complete surrender. Life with Damien was a study in contrasts. He was the most gentle man she had ever known, and the most ruthless. He would bring her a rare first-edition art book he'd flown in from Paris, and in the next breath, take a call that ended a man's career, or perhaps his life. Gemma, in turn, began to bloom in the sterile safety of the penthouse. The fear that had been her constant companion for years finally receded, replaced by a confidence she never knew she possessed. She began to advise him on his private art acquisitions, her knowledge impressing even him. She was no longer a guest, nor a prisoner. She was the queen of his gilded cage, and she found, to her surprise, that she wore the crown well. The true test, however, came 6 months after the gala. Damien was in a silent Cold War with a rival organization, a shadowy group that was trying to encroach on his territory. The tension in the penthouse was palpable. He was more guarded, his guards were doubled, and he forbade Gemma from leaving the building, even with an escort. One evening, he was supposed to be home for dinner, but he was late. Hours late. Gemma paced the living room, the panoramic view of the city no longer a comfort, but a taunt. Mrs. Petrov was visibly anxious, which terrified Gemma more than anything. Then, the private elevator chimed. Damien entered, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt stained with blood. It wasn't his. He was flanked by 2 of his men, his face a mask of cold, lethal rage. "Damien!" Gemma cried, running to him. He waved his men off, his eyes locking on her. He had a cut over his eyebrow and his knuckles were split and bloody. "There was an ambush," he said, his voice tight. "A disagreement." "You're hurt," she breathed, reaching for his face. "It is nothing," he dismissed, but she could see the pain he was trying to hide. He was favoring his left side. She guided him to the sofa, ignoring his protests. "Mrs. Petrov," she ordered, her voice sharp with an authority that surprised them both, "get the medical kit, the large one, and whiskey. Now." The housekeeper, for the first time, looked at Gemma with something akin to respect and hurried off. Gemma, her hands shaking, gently unbuttoned his shirt. His ribs were a geography of dark, angry bruises, and there was a shallow graze from a bullet along his side. It was a close call, far too close. "They tried to kill you," she whispered, her stomach turning. "They failed," he grunted, wincing as she cleaned the graze with an antiseptic pad. He was watching her, his icy eyes narrowed, not in pain but in fascination. She was not crying. She was not hysterical. She was focused, her touch clinical and sure, her anger a low, steady burn. "You're angry," he observed. "Of course I'm angry," she snapped, her hands working deftly to bandage his side. They tried to take you from me. They tried to put a bullet in you. She finished her work, pulling the bandage tight, making him hiss. Good, she said, her emerald eyes flashing. You are reckless. You own this city, but you are not immortal. He stared at her for a long, silent moment. The cold, ruthless mafia boss looked, stunned. Then slowly he began to laugh. It was not a loud laugh, but a low, deep rumble in his chest that seemed to shock even him. He reached up, his uninjured hand cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. No, he said, his voice raw with a new, unfamiliar emotion. I am not immortal, but you, Mia Kara, you are magnificent. He pulled her down, wincing at the movement, and kissed her. It was not the kiss of possession from their first night, nor the kiss of hunger. It was something new. It was a kiss of equals, a kiss of desperation and profound, undeniable connection. He was the wolf, and she, he realized, was not a lost bird. She was a lioness, and she was protecting her own. The next morning, Gemma woke up in his bed, curled against his bandaged side. He was already awake, watching her. You are free to go, you know, he said quietly, his voice rough from the night. Gemma went still. It was the same offer from their first morning, but the context was entirely different. The war with his rivals was not over. It was more dangerous now than ever. You are offering me an exit, she said, sitting up, the silk sheet pooling around her waist. Before the real storm hits. You are offering me my old life back. I am offering you a choice, he corrected, though his jaw was tight as if the words pained him. What I do, it is not safe. You saw that last night. I will not have you caught in the crossfire. I can send you away, anywhere you want. A new name, a new life, safe. Gemma looked at him, at the cut over his eye, the dark stubble on his jaw, the icy blue eyes that held a new, carefully guarded vulnerability. She thought of her old life, a life of running, of being small, of being afraid. She thought of Mark, a weak, cruel man. And then she looked at Damien, a strong, dangerous, and in his own way honorable man. He protected his own. And she had realized last night was his. You're a fool, Damien Delano, she said softly, tracing the line of his collarbone. He frowned. I thought you were the smartest man I'd ever met, but you're a fool. And why is that? Because you think I want to be safe, she whispered. I don't, I want to be with you. She leaned in, kissing him softly. You are not sending me away, I am not leaving. This is my home, you are my home, so you will go and you will finish this war. You will do what you have to do to protect what is ours, and you will come back to me. Do you understand? Damien's eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of doubt, any flicker of fear. He found none. He saw only the emerald-eyed woman who had, months ago, walked across a ballroom and sat on his lap, claiming him as her protector. And now, she was claiming him as her own. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her, holding her as if she were the only thing anchoring him to the world. I understand, he murmured against her hair. The war ended a week later. It was not a war of attrition. It was a storm swift and brutal. Damien moved with a devastating precision, dismantling his rival's organization from the inside out. He did not come home for 3 days. Gemma waited, her fear a cold stone in her stomach, but her faith in him absolute. On the 4th day, he returned. He walked into the penthouse, exhausted, bruised, but whole. He was alone. He found her in the library, and he didn't say a word. He just walked to her and buried his face in her hair, inhaling her scent, his large body trembling almost imperceptibly with the release of tension. It's done, he whispered. It's over. Good, she replied, her arms wrapping tightly around his waist, holding him up. Welcome home. Months later, the city was quiet, settled firmly under Damien's control. The gala season had come around again. Gemma stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, dressed in a stunning gown of emerald green, the color of her eyes. Damien came up behind her, his arms sliding around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. He had a gift. He opened a black velvet box, and inside sat a magnificent diamond necklace, glittering like captured stars. It is beautiful, she breathed. He took it out, his fingers brushing her neck as he fastened the clasp. I am not a man who asks, he said, his voice unusually hesitant. I am a man who takes, who decides. I know, she said, leaning back against his solid chest. But with you, he continued, his voice dropping to that low, intense murmur that still made her shiver. It is different. I do not want to own a woman who is my captive. I want to be partners with the woman who sat on my lap and faced down the entire world. He turned her in his arms, his icy blue eyes searing into hers. There is no deal, Gemma. There is no cage, just me and you. Is that enough? Gemma smiled, a real, radiant smile. She thought of the torn blue dress, the terror, the desperation of that night. She thought of the man who had offered her a shield and who had, in the end, given her his entire, dark, complicated heart. She rose on her toes, her hands cupping his face. "It's more than enough," she whispered, and she pulled him down for a kiss, sealing their future not as a bargain, but as a promise high above the city they now owned together.